We're going to start off with Tanya Senk. Tanya Senk, who is Métis Cree Soto, is a proud relation to Louis Riel, has been a member of the Toronto District School Board for 23 years and its first Indigenous System Superintendent of Indigenous Education. She intends to create systemic change for future and current Indigenous peoples in the education system and plans to deepen the knowledge of Indigenous perspectives through the understanding that Indigenous education is for everyone. As she got older, Tanya pursued a bachelor's degree in fine arts from York University and got her first job at the TBSD Brookview Middle. From there, she completed her master's in Indigenous education from York University and is currently pursuing her PhD in urban Indigenous education, decolonizing education law and human rights. And presenting alongside her is Joanna Simon, who is an Indigenous food sovereignty chef. So, Tanya and Joan, please take it away.
Thank you very much for the introduction. We're happy to co-present here today on coming to the table, exploring school food together. So my name is Tanya Senk, and I'm System Superintendent of Indigenous Education in the Toronto District School Board. The Toronto District School Board is the largest board in Canada, and really honored to be co-presenting with Joanna Simon, who will also introduce herself. So my relations and relatives, they come from Saskatoon and Regina. And I grew up with my kokum on a farm in Saskatchewan that traversed the Saskatchewan-Manitoba border. And so my mother's name is Bellumer. My grandmother's name is Pelche. So we come from the Desjardins, Delorme, Pelche, and Bellumer lines. My grandmother is from Cowessess First Nation, and she was enfranchised due to the gender discrimination in the Indian Act. And my grandfather is he's Métis from the Red River, and the Red River Métis. And so over to you, Joanna, to introduce yourself.
Ani Bojo, everybody. My name is Joanna Simon. I am Ojibwe and Mi'kmaq. My father is from Grassy Narrows, Ontario, and my mother is from Elsipogtog, New Brunswick, which used to be called Big Cove. And I was adopted at 3 months by a Odawa and Potawatomi family from Manitoulin Island, and the reserve there is called Wikwemkong. And I was also brought up in an agricultural background, like Tanya. My parents were big into agricultural activities and farming, etc. And it's really nice to be part of this conversation. And oh yeah, I forgot to say I'm Bear Clan as well. And yeah, so thanks for having us here.
Hi, Miigwech and Marcy. Thank you, Joanna. So what we're going to do, first of all, is we're going to provide some context to how the program came to be. I'll be speaking to that, and then the exceptionally talented and wonderful, brilliant Joanna will be speaking to what it actually looks like in the school setting. So to provide some context, I'm also speaking with regard to the Urban Indigenous Education Center on this Indigenous Food Sovereignty Program. And it was founded in 2019. And we worked very closely with the Ministry of Education in Ontario and the Indigenous Education Office of the ministry. And we received support. And in that way, we were able to hire 3 Indigenous food sovereignty chefs, Joanna Simon being one of them, and to work out of the Urban Indigenous Education Center and a grade K-12 Indigenous focused school in Toronto called Kapapamahchakwew Wandering Spirit School. And also in the 2 different sites, we have the Native Learning Centers that are situated, one in the east and one very central. And it is the first of its kind in a publicly funded school board across the province of Ontario. And currently the program is located at the 3 sites that I mentioned, as it will continue to grow metaphorically and literally speaking. So we're very happy. And also this was guided by the Elders Council that we work very closely with in the Urban Indigenous Education Center and the Toronto District School Board. And this program is informed by Indigenous ways of knowing, doing, and being. And some of the contexts are food policy in Canada must acknowledge the history and the ongoing impacts of colonization on Indigenous food sovereignty and Indigenous food systems, and that food is used as a tool of colonization and oppression, and our commitment to telling the truth and truth-telling pedagogies as they relate to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to action around the legacy of residential schools and Indigenous peoples being forcibly removed from the land. So policies continue to limit and destroy Indigenous peoples' ability to gather and to hunt and to fish, impacting Indigenous food sovereignty, which is connected to a broader process of cultural genocide. I have a cousin, Donald Bellimer, in Saskatchewan, and he's part of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan out there, where he had to prove his identity and his citizenship to the Métis Nation because he was fishing. You may know of the case. So also it is to identify the distinction between food security and Indigenous food sovereignty systems, which are connected to Indigenous cultures, economies, geographies, and takes on a holistic approach to health with regard to nourishing and nurturing the mind, the body, the heart, and the spirit. And also that Indigenous food sovereignty has the potential to assert Indigenous food systems in nation-to-nation building, so relations in and between Indigenous communities, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and relationship with Indigenous peoples, with Canada, and with the Crown. So there's the inherent connection to land and access that this be acknowledged, and to grow Indigenous food sovereignty. It is a multifaceted and multi-layered and complex process we're moving through. And certainly this is about upholding and creating space and speaking to Indigenous brilliance as it relates to food systems in relation to sustainable environments as well, and to self-determination. So the guiding principles of this are Indigenous food sovereignty and sustainability, Indigenous land-based education and pedagogies. And many of you have heard the term that Indigenous law is land, air, and water, informed by Indigenous knowledges and perspectives. Also, we're following the teachings of the medicine wheel in that holistic way of nurturing the mind and the body, the spirit and the heart, the emotional, mental, and spiritual, physical aspects of self in relation to all of our relatives, the earth and the animals and the winged ones, etc. It's also guided by the teachings of the 7 canopies, as taught to us by Elder Dr. Duke Redbird on the food forest, which also centers the 7 sacred teachings. It's centered in the 13 grandmother moons, as taught to us by Elder Pauline Shirt around the 4 seasons teachings. And we speak to the calls to action that speak to education, language, and culture and health, because we are continuing to center Anishinaabe and also to speak to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in Articles 28, 29, and 31, and the right to approve or disapprove incursions into Indigenous land. Because it's situated in schools, students have an opportunity to engage in the programming, to get co-op credits, and we're also working towards developing the resources that speak to the curriculum. It also speaks to the rematriation of the land and the rematriation of Indigenous pedagogies and education, and really thinking about the Matsawin, walking in a good way, Pamatsawin, looking to the dish with one spoon, wampum, which is an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share the land, to eat from one dish with one spoon, speaking to sustainability and the Haudenosaunee cultural teachings of Center Generations principles. And further, it is the decolonizing strategy in education when this knowledge is centered in the curriculum and we move through knowledge mobilization. So it supports the students. They have opportunities to do co-op. We're looking into combined and dual credits, centering it in the curriculum, providing professional learning, and working with students and community members and our partnerships and community engagement, as well as doing a pilot project on research through the University of Toronto, the Walkman Bryce Institute for Indigenous Health. So miigwech, over to you, Joanna.
Thanks, Tanya. So here in our building, as Tanya had said, in the Kapapamahchakwew school, we have kindergarten students all the way up to grade 12. And our funding through the Toronto Foundation for Student Success allows us to provide breakfast, snack, lunch, and afternoon snack. So one of the first things that I did when I started here was think about the terminology around the word food sovereignty. And there's many definitions out there. There's many different ideas out there. But the two main, well, actually 3 main things that I like to focus on are the community aspect of it, the access to the actual program and the foods, the Indigenous food systems that we have here, and the fact that food is sacred. When I say food is sacred, I mean food is a gift from the Creator and from Mother Earth. So we treat it in a very respectful manner. And oh, I don't know what happened to my video there. Can everyone still hear me?
I can hear you, Joanna.
Okay, you can still hear me? Okay, I don't know what happened to the video. Oh, there we are. Okay, so because we're in the Great Lakes region and many of our students here are from the area, and with our Dish with One Spoon treaty, we have a lot of Haudenosaunee, we have a lot of Cree, and we have a lot of Ojibwe. Not to say that we don't have Inuit and Saulteaux and Métis students as well, but those 3 nations in this area that we're in is where I try to focus our main components of our diet here and our menu. So being in the Great Lakes, I'd like to incorporate a lot of wild rice into our menu and make sure that the kids are getting to enjoy that on a weekly basis. And also corn, which is a very common food for a lot of the local First Nations here in the school. So not only do we provide the Indian corn, the mandamin, as my people call it actually, which my dad grows. I have a little jar. I don't know if you can see it there. Um, we have that on the menu a lot, as well as beans, the Three Sisters, which are corn, beans, and squash. I'm not sure if a lot of you who are on the Zoom call know that, but culturally speaking, the Three Sisters are a big part of our diets in our communities. So I incorporate that as well into the menu. And then, of course, fish and wild game. And when Tanya mentioned food being used as a tool of colonization and oppression in our food systems, um, that's a point of contention with us because we want to serve the children moose meat, for example, and we have to make sure that we have proper permission forms signed and the like, so that we don't get in any trouble from Toronto Public Health or the Ontario Health people who are in charge of inspecting the food and whatnot. So we have a lot of work to do there, but we can work around that because there are game farms that we are allowed to use. So we will provide bison, elk, and venison, which is really nice treat for the kids, and it's been really fantastic to see and to offer these foods to them. Especially being an urban Indigenous population here, a lot of us are removed from our community and from our Indigenous food systems and foodways. So providing opportunities for them to try these foods, they're not only connecting with their ancestors, but they're just connecting with who they are in such a meaningful way. It's a beautiful thing to see, and it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. And it's something that we're all constantly trying to improve on. And, we're always asking for feedback from the community and establishing more food sovereignty relationships, not only with the community, but also with vendors. So finding, wild rice cooperatives who can provide us with freshly harvested wild rice, and people who can provide us with the corn and the beans and all of that good stuff. And it's really about, making those connections and accessing your community and finding out who those people are and providing opportunity for input. And we also ask the students to participate in the menu. There are times when the nutrition committee has put forth a questionnaire or almost like a little contest to see which classes can come up with menu items that can be added in to our weekly menus or monthly menu, so that they have a real sense of participation and that their voices as students are being heard and celebrated. And because like I said, we're in an urban community here, we have a lot of children who are Afro-Indigenous or mixed with other cultures. So sometimes when we do these community outreach programs, a lot of them will ask for cultural items that are not specifically Indigenous, but we will indigenize them. For example, someone asked for fried rice. And so we make it with mallard duck breast and wild rice. And it's been a hit, and it's been a real pleasure to do things like that, to really play with our international and urban in a community and celebrate everybody's different backgrounds and stuff in a really good and meaningful way. Another thing that we're trying to do as an urban Indigenous community here in Toronto is land back. We're trying to use the land here at the school to do community-oriented ceremonies. Sunrise ceremonies are conducted here quite often, and we have a teepee on the grounds, and the kids actually began the school year with what I guess we would say would be akin to a walking out ceremony, but instead it's like a welcoming ceremony. So all the children by grade were welcome into the teepee. We conducted ceremony. They walked out on a path of cedar. They put their tobacco in the sacred fire. And when they walked back in the teepee, we were there as a community, as a staff, as an administration team to welcome the children to the school in a good way. And I feel like all of these things, all of these practices are all part of Indigenous food sovereignty. It's like Tanya said in the beginning, there's so many things that connect to this. There's so many different levels. And so far, our program has been in effect for about 3 years. And it's, we're just still in the infancy stages, but I feel like we've already accomplished so much. And I feel like as the years go on, as the months go on, we're only going to get better and better. And I'm hoping that, with connecting with everyone here at the University of Saskatoon, that we can make more connections and, maybe share some menu ideas or recipes and just start from there and really just start providing children with these beautiful practices and just, moving forward in a good way and making that, that connection and celebrating Indigenous brilliance and knowledge, sharing knowledge and yeah, it's a beautiful thing, really. And I feel like anybody can begin this. Like it just takes a little step in the right direction and it can be done.
Thank you, Miigwech. And so we're going to open it up to the floor for any questions, discussion, comments, etc. And really looking forward to engaging in a conversation as we continue to move forward. And it is a beautiful thing. And it just makes our heart sing what's happening here. There's a lot of work to do. So I'm not sure how that gets moderated, if somebody turns their camera on and speaks, or if it goes into the chat. Who's helping to support with this particular part of the presentation?
I have questions, but I don't want to ask the first question. So, well, maybe I will. The question that I have is a very technical kind of question, so I hesitate to ask it first. But I'm very curious about the funding model that you have and how you're able to have sufficient funds for the staff and the food that you need in order to run the programs that you run. Can you hear?
So I'll speak to the funding that's available for Indigenous education in Ontario, and Joanna can speak to the Toronto Foundation for Student Success. That's where we get our funding from. So in Ontario, the Ministry of Education through the Indigenous Education Office or the branch provide funding for all boards across Ontario, publicly funded boards, that is completely sweatered and protected for Indigenous education. And so we report on this through our board action plan, and our funding is generated in different ways. And one of the ways, for example, is through the implementation of the First Nations Métis Inuit Studies curriculum that has been revised in 2019 through the ministry, and that was co-constructed and co-developed with Indigenous communities, elders, and knowledge keepers. And so we were able to hire Indigenous graduation coaches through our board with the support of this funding, and create a position that is a full-time position that is unionized through the board, and that comes with all the benefits that the employees of the TDSB have access to. So there's that funding, and that's generated through the board action plan, GSN, student enrollment, and we don't do the self-identification because there's a lot of work to do there, and that's multi-layered and complex. But that is where the funding to be able to do this is coming from, and also working with partners. So example, with York University, the University of Toronto's Waakbanis Bryce Institute, and other partnerships that we have developed and honed over the time since this program started. Joanna?
Okay, so for us here at the school, and actually almost every school in Toronto has access to the Toronto Foundation for Student Success funding, which essentially will fund your breakfast program, your snack program, your lunch program, and your afternoon snack program. However, not every school applies for it, or not every school gets approved for it. So it's a combination of the provincial government as well as the municipal government. So the city of Toronto will give us funding, and then the province will give us funding. The only thing that they ask in return is that we're completely transparent with how we spend our money, and that we fill out monthly reports where we give them our vendor invoices, our bank statements, and the like. So as long as we're meeting their requirements, which are pretty easy to maintain. They say as long as a lunch has, I have it here, as long as a lunch has 1 serving of vegetables and fruit, a serving of grain products, and a serving of milk or milk alternatives, then that's considered a meal. So you have to devise a menu that has those 3 things. And for snack, it's going to be a fruit or a vegetable, and then one of those other 2 categories. So as long as there's a dairy or a dairy alternative in there, and a protein, whether it's a legume or meat or cheese, then if you can show them that your menu meets that criteria, then you will be given your funding. We also, because a lot of Indigenous folks try to stay away from, things like dairy and white sugar. In our building, we make sure that we don't use any of what they call the white gifts or curses, depending on how you look at it. So we never use white sugar. We never use white flour. We never use lard, and we never use, well, I can't say we never use salt. We have to use salt, sometimes, but just not in excess, and never given, the children are never given it as a condiment at meal times or anything like that. So as long as you meet the criteria for that, then you will receive the funding from the province and the municipality. And then outside of that, we've reached out to people like President's Choice, and they have a PC grants program that I believe is open to any school as well, or community based programming. And there's applications available for that on Grants Connect. And then there's also Farm to Cafeteria. Since you guys are in Saskatchewan, you've probably heard of that program because I believe it does originate in British Columbia. And we've managed to get grants from Farm to Cafeteria through that. Also, our land-based learning instructor teamed up with me last year and we applied for funding for that. And we were able to receive the funding and then do really awesome things with the kids out on the land, like filleting. So preparing fish, descaling it, filleting it, salting it, and smoking it in the old way. So, you know, and that's things like these funders, these people who provide this, they want to know about, they want to know your ideas, exactly what kind of programming you intend to use the funds for. And as long as you can carry out those things, then you will most likely get approved. And yeah, so that's how we run our program here on the daily. And I'm not sure what access people have in Saskatchewan, but I hope it is just as good, if not better.
Thank you, Joanna. The other thing I wanted to mention too, in terms of how we gather the funding opportunities, is through grants as well. So thank you for mentioning that. And also we are represented on what's called TASC, TASSC, and that is the Toronto Aboriginal Social Services Council, made up of 19 different Indigenous-led organizations across the Toronto District School Board. And the funding that we receive, that we can contribute to the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Program. And moving forward as well, our board dedicated one of the outdoor education centers through a unanimous passing of a motion that this space, this land in this particular outdoor education center is dedicated to Indigenous land-based learning opportunities and opportunities for learning from the land. And so that's the big picture moving ahead, is that we will have that. And also we are in the process of creating and greening our own space in Toronto, which was mentioned by Joanna, and working with the staff and the Indigenous land-based educator to grow our own food and to grow our own sacred medicines. Right now, students do have the opportunity to visit various outdoor education sites in the Toronto District School Board, and we have worked in 3 different sites to grow our own sacred medicines.
I have I guess you sort of answered a little bit, but I'm wondering if there's any unique challenges you guys ran into, particularly with your land-based education and that kind of stuff, being in Toronto in such an urban environment.
I can speak to that first, and then Joanna, whatever you like, or jump in anytime. Is well, growing up in a big city like Toronto, there are many parks. There's, you know, the land is the sky and the air and the water and the earth. Knowing that although many generations of Indigenous children who go to our schools have lived in Toronto for generations, there are opportunities, as I said, to leave the city and then we also have these outdoor education sites as well in the city. The one that I'm referring to is the Boyne. It's about an hour away. So we could take the bus, go there for the day, do overnight excursions. So we work in close relation with the outdoor education sites and the staff, working with the elders and the Indigenous knowledge keepers and the staff that do the Indigenous land-based education with our community partners as well. So this is a good opportunity for young people who've been living in high rises, for example, for most of their life to have access and to learn from the land where we are situated. In Toronto, we're on 5 acres of land in our facility. There are opportunities there, and there are parks around, and we do what we do where we are and have the opportunity to have other experiences close to the city or outside of the city.
Is there anybody else? Oh,
Hi, I think this is maybe either of you could answer, but do you have any tips on how to maybe start to discourage some of the processed foods that parents and people in the community send to school for lunch? Like, there's a lot of times that they have an option to try traditional food, and I have a school garden growing, and some students are into it, but a lot of them show up with pizza pops, fruit roll-ups, Kool-Aid, and chips. And I'm just wondering if there's a way, or if you have any tips on how to get the parents more involved and more informed on how dangerous processed food really is.
This is a really hard thing to do, because when you talk about food, you never want, because so many people have lack of access to good, wholesome, nutritious food, and a lot of people who live in poverty, you know, only have access to certain types of foods. You never want to shame people, and you never want to make them feel bad because of their food insecurity, really. You know, I know there's a lot of food deserts and you know, food insecure communities out there, and it's really hard because people used to say healthy food, good food, and bad food, but when you say things like that, you're already delving into that area where you're making people feel a sense of shame and a sense of they feel bad, because sometimes that's really all they can have, right? I think it just lies more in encouraging and really speaking on all levels, whether it's parents, caregivers, you know, family, teachers, people in the building, people in the community, of just impressing upon how amazing our Indigenous foodways are, how beautiful it is to be able to eat with the seasons, how beautiful it is to be able to eat the same foods our ancestors ate, and to be able to eat these whole foods. Because when we eat those processed foods that have so much sugar and sodium in them, you know, this is all leading us down the path of diabetes and high blood pressure and obesity. And but because of what happened in the residential schools and how a lot of our food systems have been taken away from us, it is so hard to get our families and our people back in this good way of living, this good way of life. And I always say the best way you can do it is to just lead by example, because, you know, if you can see it, then you can be it. And we just need them to be seeing more of this. We need them to be seeing this all around them. And, you know, pretty soon, I think it's going to be the norm, hopefully. And, you know, we'll be able to have, you know, an easier time converting everybody over to this way of eating and this way of living, because like you said, it is really hard when you have, you know, children coming with juice boxes and pizza pops and all of these things. All I can say is that I've seen it here, and hopefully maybe you can see it in your communities, that, you know, leading by example and just always providing that option. And even with us, we've started a salad bar, and it sounds kind of like a small thing, but it's actually turned into a really big thing, because now, you know, there are kids here who feel like it's cool to go to the salad bar. It's cool to go and get veggies, and also they're practicing, you know, they're self-determining there, because they're saying, I like this, and I want to choose to have just cucumber or just lettuce. And it's just small things like that, I feel, that would, you know, start making a more positive conversation around food. Like, you never want to have food uh, used as a punishment, and you never want to make someone feel bad about only being to be able to access certain quality of food. So yeah, it's a really hard discussion. It's a real hard fine line there, but I feel like, you know, if anyone has a good idea, please share it. But, you know, that's all, I don't know, that's all I can really say about that. It is a pretty tough thing to manage.
We have a question in the chat here. How do you maintain all the staffing needs to support this offering of more whole foods in meals? What is the staffing model like? Teachers, EAs, volunteers, school nutrition program staff?
So I want to say further to what Joanna was saying earlier, and the question around the food. It's been a few years, and prior to that, we were doing something similar. You know, we're moving through COVID and everything else. Is what I'm seeing is the choices that the younger students are making. They're really gravitating towards the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Program. So that's been what's been happening, because they've been doing it now for a couple of years. And the other thing that I want to mention is that the staffing needs, as we mentioned before, are supported through the Indigenous education funding through the ministry and through the Toronto Foundation for Student Success. And it's really a whole school construct, working too with the Caregiver Circle, which many know is called the Parent Advisory Council, but we call it the Caregiver Circle, that all the teachers, it's an Indigenous focused school. We have Indigenous and non-Indigenous teachers working together in support of the program. And also many of the teachers also provide the funding because they wish to have what's on the menu themselves for lunch, and then that funding gets reinvested back into the program. So we're seeing a really intergenerational kind of model of the younger ones and the older ones and the elders and the staff all eating from the same menu to really create that family community perspective that comes into play. So that's where that is. And Joanna, maybe you want to talk about the co-op opportunities and the students who support, and the support that you have right now.
Yes. So the way the Toronto Foundation for Student Success operates is that usually parental contributions would cover the stipend for the volunteers. But because our school is Indigenous focused, and, you know, with that comes not many parents being able to make that financial contribution, we have asked the staff and other people in the building to contribute via a staff meal plan. So like Tanya was saying, they will take part in the meals, they pay a certain fee, and then we use those funds to help pay for our volunteers, of which I have 2. And then I also have co-op students from the high school. So every semester I have 2 co-op students, and this from the secondary student body, and they earn credits to help us out down here in the kitchen. So we use them to do food prep, food delivery, or, you know, whatever is needed, whatever is required of them. They help us out in that way. And then with the grade eights, being the leaders in the building, in terms of the elementary branch of our school, they're being asked to practice leadership skills, and they like to help deliver afternoon snack as a result. So just reaching out to our community as well as our parent council and our staff, and just help asking people for a hand whenever it's needed. But yeah, just coming up with creative ways like that, it has really helped us execute this program and carry it out in a good way, and in a way where everybody feels involved, everybody feels like they have a hand in it. So there's a lot more pride too. And I think it's working. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's great to see staff participating and having meals with the students. And the other thing I see here, to speak further to what Joanna was saying, there's a question here just confirming the guidelines, Joanna. So we try to reduce dairy, as was mentioned, because of it's called the 5 white gifts, or the 5 white sins, as Joanna referred to, and speaks to residential school, and also the rations that were given. And that is white flour, white sugar, dairy, lard, and salt. And so really removing that from the diet, and dairy as much as possible. There's been a lot of work done on the revamping of the Canada Food Guide. So we indigenize that food guide. And I want to say thank you to Janet Krentz, who is sharing a resource with us, and we'll take a look at that as well. Also with the program, because it's a part of the nutrition programming through the TDSB, there are certified dietitians that work with us as well to ensure that these students are getting a well-rounded, nutritious diet that has been indigenized.
Does anyone have questions?
Thank you. Hi, I am Michelle from the University of Saskatchewan. I just have a quick question. You mentioned that you evaluate like acceptance of the menus in the children. I'm wondering what activities do you do for that?
Okay. So I guess it wouldn't be really an activity. It's more of an observation. And because now that COVID's over and the children are back in the cafeteria environment, which is right outside where we prepare the food here, we see an immediate evaluation, if you will, because they are not shy about coming up to me and telling me, Miss Joanna, I love the food today, or I really enjoy this, or I enjoy that. And, I also have students who are very frank and will be like, Miss Joanna, I hate squash. Don't ever serve it to me again. So, you have that evaluation. It happens in real time. And, children see everything and they're very honest, and they will always let you know. That's a wonderful thing about them.
Thank you, Joanna. I also want to say that every morning there's announcements, and students do the announcements as well. And they talk about what's on the menu, and they center Anishinaabe as well, and work towards, getting the kids excited about what's on the menu for the day. But you will find out, whether they like the food or not, just by the way that they're responding. And also that the teachers with staff are also talking about what's on the menu for the day as well. So you'll find out what people's preferences are. what they really enjoy and what they don't want to see again. And hence the, the choice that can be made through the salad bar and the choices offered.
Okay. Hello, I'm Natalia, also from U of S. First of all, I wanted to thank you for all the information, and also I wanted to congratulate you for everything you have said and done, especially Joanne. I love the way you express yourself and how cheerful you are about the program and how convinced you are of the importance of it. And since you said you have been running this program for 3 years, I wanted to ask you if there are some special milestones or steps towards all this path in these 3 years. Thank you.
I guess the milestones would be the first menu that I ever put out. That was incredible because previous to my beginning here, they were basically eating sandwiches and wraps every day. And before that, the parent volunteers, they were making certain foods that they thought were healthy, but the kids weren't enjoying. So the first milestone was making a menu that had Indigenous ingredients, but that was still palatable towards the children's tastes. And children eat with their eyes, right? And that's something I always like to keep in mind. So when you look at something, if it looks like slop or mush, they're gonna hate it because they're gonna say, "Ew, what is that?" And so we try to make things look good as well as taste good. And so that would be the first thing. And then I think the second thing was getting them to try different wild game meats. So, the first time they tried duck, it was incredible because a lot of people thought, oh, I don't know that they're going to like it. And, some teachers said, oh, it's chicken. And they were convinced to eat it. But now, they don't even blink an eye. And, watching them enjoy something like elk or deer, and just seeing they're a little bit scared to try it. They don't know what to expect. And they try it, or they see their friends try it and they're just like, yay, we love it. It's so cool to them now. So I think those were the most amazing milestones to have. And now it's just been a real joy to see and hear the kids coming and asking me like, what's for lunch tomorrow? Or what are we having next? Or can we have this again soon? Things like that. And it's really amazing thing to do and to see and to be a part of. And yeah, I don't know if Tanya wants to speak to any milestones maybe she has seen or noticed, but that's all I can think of off the top of my head.
Those are great milestones. And I see another comment around the facility. So we did receive some funding from the Ministry of Education. It's called community funding. And we were able to build a brand new community kitchen. So it's a nice big kitchen, and there's an area there as well that has a number of different areas so that it can be taken up. Classes can be had in one area of the kitchen. And we are in the process actually of trying to acquire funding to build a brand new school where Kapapamahchakwew and the Urban Indigenous Education Center will be as a somewhat of a community hub or an Indigenous site, because we hold a lot of various community events. And Joanna was speaking to some of them, like sunrise ceremony, round dances, and also we celebrate winter solstice. And food is always a part of that. So what's been the milestone is creating the program and having Joanna as the Indigenous food sovereignty chef makes me so happy I could cry. And seeing the kids just really enjoying it and everybody in the building enjoying it, and having our elders enjoying it as well, and being together that way.
We do have another question. Interesting in hearing more about the cafeteria infrastructure. Sounds like it is a well-equipped kitchen. Is it correct to assume that your school facility has always had a kitchen? And would you say more school buildings these days should house a well-equipped kitchen to support more wholesome meals and foods?
Okay, so our cafeteria is, it's a big room and it has a bunch of big banquet tables. The benches are attached to them. I don't know if you've seen it. Not the most comfortable sitting area, but we make the best of it. But our school has always had a kitchen. It's what you might envision as your regular staff kitchen. It had a refrigerator, it had a stove with an oven, and a little bit of prep space with a little bit of equipment. And when I first started here, I cooked for 1 week in a kitchen similar to that. And then we moved over to the new kitchen that we have that Tanya just mentioned. The school was able to do that renovation and to make a bigger space. So we have a big walk-in fridge. We have a couple of freezers. We have a dishwasher, and we have a gas range with a convection oven and some other basic tools like that, which is great for our needs. But I feel like even if you had a small little kitchen with just a stovetop and an oven, like I feel like you can still, and a couple big pots, you could still make this program happen. You know what I mean? And yes, I feel like all schools should be equipped with these basic things, because food is a part of life. We all eat, we all need to eat. And, I think that every school should come with a kitchen for sure, for sure.
Thank you. So we are in an old building. It was built in the 1920s. That's why we're looking for funding to build a brand new school. We're working with some Indigenous architects right now to do some conceptual drawings as we move towards being able to get the funding that is outside of what the Ministry of Education prescribes in their capital builds. And that's a big project. So a new site, not a new site, still the same site, but a new school that's premised on Indigenous principles, around Indigenous pedagogies, and also working with the Indigenous land-based site that I spoke to. This is a vision further long ahead in the years to come. Right now, it's a big cafeteria that follows a cafeteria like any cafeteria. It used to be a high school, so it's for secondary students, and we're trying to do the best that we can to do some retrofitting and to create spaces that are more welcoming for the younger students. However, there are challenges, and those are some of the things that we're working through at this time. And it's great, Joanna, that this program, you can do it with a couple of big pots, and that's what we used to do. We had an older kitchen, and then we moved to a smaller kitchen while a new kitchen was being built. Kitchens are always the heart of any place that you're at. People congregate in the kitchen. You learn at the kitchen, you interact at the kitchen, you build relationships in the kitchen. These are pedagogies of the kitchen table. So working more towards that construct, and then also learning from and the Indigenous land-based programming that we have as well.
I just wanted to ask Joanne, how many students does she serve for lunch? like usually, normally with these big soup pots you're talking about? I'm just curious because I do the lunch program.
Did she hear the
Okay.
question?
Yeah, I heard you. So every day we could have upwards of 150 students in the building. Many more are registered, but I believe some are still virtual learning. So yeah, I prepare food anywhere from 120 to 150 people, and then in November our staff lunch program is beginning again. And you know, there's going to be an additional probably 20 people, if we're lucky, to cook for. So that's how many people we are feeding every day, 4 meals a day, or 2 meals and 2 snacks. And, you know, high school, they've always been funny with snacks. Sometimes they love them, sometimes they hate them. So I leave it up to them now. If you guys want a snack, come down and see us. Rather than it getting delivered to their classroom. So yeah, that's how many people we serve here.
I'm just going to hand it back to Jordan. I think that's all for questions on our end. Thank you so much, ladies.
Yes, thank you so much. Trying to time that with the clamp there. Thank you so much, Tanya and Joanna, got it right the second time, for that lovely presentation. That sounds amazing and makes me wish I was a kid again and could go to that school. So thank you.